word so. Let's see how many do it with this next panel. So without any further ado, I'd now like to welcome Paul Papadimitriou, who runs Constellation Research, a Japan-based consultancy on strategic marketing, communications, business, online media, and disruptive technology. Thank you, Paul. Please come on up.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's start.
Hello. Oh, I have the mic. Hello guys, how are you? So we're fighting against the lunch behind against the noise. So I'm gonna ask all of you guys to actually shout in microphones, otherwise we don't hear shit. So I'm gonna quickly introduce by name the panelists. So in order, sitting first is Biddle from Intel. Then is Michael Kaiser from Seesmic. Wonder why he's here, by the way. Yeah, Loic has something to do with that? I'm kidding you. Then we have Julien Cordoniou from Microsoft, and Patrick Chanezon, is that correct? Chanezon, yeah, from Google. So I'm gonna quickly let you first introduce yourself, just quickly say what you do, like in a few words, and if you go over time, I'm obviously gonna shut you off. Peter, will you start?
Yeah, cool. So I'm Peter Biddle. I run AppUp for Intel, appup.com, and you can Google me if you wanna know more about me.
Marco?
Okay, yeah, my name is Marco Kaiser. I work for Seesmic and I lead the desktop products over at Seesmic.
Julien Cordoniou, I work for Microsoft in France and I manage the
Yeah, give me that one.
I manage the local BizDev and partner team. So we help ISVs and startups and web agencies to build great applications on the Microsoft platform.
Hello everybody, I'm Patrick Chanezon and I'm French but I live in San Francisco and I work for Google where I manage the cloud advocacy team there.
So, how to build your own platform? So maybe first of all, you know, Loic started yesterday LeWeb in his opening talk by saying, you know, LeWeb is a platform. And we are here on a platform. I am a platform for my own clothes, for Christ's sake. So last year we had like tons of social media experts. And if you continue, we'll have next year platforms ninjas and platform Jedis. Everybody wants to do a platform. So maybe I want to start with asking you guys, for you, what is a platform in your eyes? I know you have different ways of doing platforms because some of you are doing mobile, some of you are doing cloud, some of you are doing a platform like Seesmic. So what's your definition of a platform? Maybe we should start with that. Quick words.
Yeah, so I think up until quite recently, the definition of platform tended to focus on architecture. So people like referred to the cloud as the platform, which I think is bullshit. I mean, the cloud is like steel for architecture, right? Before you had steel, you couldn't build skyscrapers. Then you had steel and you could build skyscrapers. But people weren't running around going, I'm a steel builder. No, they were solving problems, building experiences, and using it as a critical ingredient in the overall experience they were trying to produce. So when we look at platforms, we think a lot more about things like, is there a common API? Are you banking on web services that are going to be commonly available in the places you want to be? What's your deployment model? What's your remuneration model? Are you ad-based? Who are your users? What's the usage model? And when you package up those questions with good answers, I think that's a platform.
Marco?
Well, yeah, I think there's no one definition to what a platform is. I think you can see a platform on different levels in the stack. Definitely there's a technical platform, which is something like a plugin extensibility, something like an API, which you can build other programs on. But it's definitely also on the product level, so you can build a platform across different devices, across like common functionality you implement, but that you can use on different endpoints. So I think there are at least these two use cases where you can see this is a platform.
What about you? The Google guy with all the APIs.
Yeah, so we have tons of APIs and I was kind of lucky to join Google when we started doing APIs 5 years ago. We had only one, now we have more than 70. To me, a platform is pretty simple. It's a piece of software you build for other developers to build upon, as opposed to end users building upon that.
So now that we had a Google view, let's see what Microsoft says. You have a bigger platform, right?
So we've been in the
Bigger is better, right?
We've been in the platform business for the last 30 years. So Windows is one of the biggest platforms in the world. But when we talk about platforms, we talk about environments that lets people who build applications make a good living and create innovations. So the bad news, and I hate to be the bad news guy, is that everybody is trying to be a platform, but it's the hardest thing in the industry. Everybody wants to be a platform, but sometimes it's better to be a great application than a huge platform. But we'll talk about that later. But for us, a platform, it's, I would say, a place where developers can build great applications, make money, and it needs to have some reach.
So basically, you're handing over your business to people that are now working with you, right? Is that the case? So you're giving APIs and you're letting other people, other developers, actually work on your own shit. So basically, you're working with them, or you're working for them. You let them working for you. How do you see that?
Well, it's a virtuous circle. The value of a platform depends on the number and the quality of application that runs on top of that platform. So you build a platform for them, and it takes a lot of investment of resources, technical and marketing resources. But the more application you have, the more valuable your platform is. So it's a very valuable ecosystem. You don't work for somebody, they don't work for you, but everybody works together in the same way.
Do you agree? Yeah.
Well, I do want to say that if you look at the web and you look at business models for small, long-tail developers, there's really only two ways to make money, and that's porn and gambling, or working for somebody else, right? So putting your own shingle up in a universe of 10 billion web pages is essentially a non-starter for small, long-tail developer. And I would say that when we look at what we're interested in doing, clearly we've been a huge beneficiary, Intel has, to the success of Windows and the web. But we look at what's happening with developers saying that they may write code during the day for the web for somebody, or .NET for somebody, but at night they write code for the iPhone or Android, and that's what they dream of. That they want to quit their day job and become an app developer. And to me, that represents a failing of the platform to actually solve the problems they have. Right? There's nothing about the web is a great programming platform. JavaScript and HTML5 are phenomenal. You can do incredibly cool things. We're seeing really awesome stuff here. But how do I actually monetize a relatively small number of eyeballs that is, a couple of decimal points to the right of the one from a world population perspective to support my business? And I think that is where both the web and operating systems, that's where we're behind, right? We need to get better at helping developers get to the 100,000 users who would be willing to buy their stuff out of 6.6 billion people.
You just said people dream about writing for iPhone and Android, and you forgot about this guy, by the way.
It's coming.
So you assume they're dreaming about doing this, but they don't do it. I mean, come on, for some platforms, they're completely failing. You mentioned in our talks about Palm. Nobody develops for Palm anymore. So how do you make those people dream for you? How do you make them dream for Google? Why would I develop for you?
Yeah, so at Google we have many different types of platforms. Basically our goal is to organize the world information, and we cannot do it by ourselves. But one of the advantages of that is that by offering a platform, we let developers build stuff on top of our APIs and different systems. And that allows us to create some of the platforms which are completely open, like Chrome, for example, or Android. And then we have some platform dedicated to monetization, for example, the AdWords API that advertisers are using to create ads in the system, which have different characteristics. So I guess it depends which kind of developers you're talking about.
Some are just willing to make money, right? So what about you? Because you're a special case. Because you're Seesmic, for those who don't know, Seesmic is a Twitter client. So it's already a platform, not only Twitter, I know, sorry for that. He started the video thing, it became Twitter, and now you have all the other IP. But what I meant is that it's a platform built on a platform, and then now you added even your own plugins. So you're building a platform on a platform on a platform, right?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, and for us, it's a completely different view on what a platform is compared to like Microsoft, Google's view, Intel's view, because it's a totally different scale. And I think, of course, you can say like it's only a platform, and to take your point of like many people fail like being a platform, I think it's a question of like how you understand being a platform. And I totally agree with you in saying like the Google APIs, the Microsoft Windows, .NET platform, framework, the Intel platform, even on the hardware level or wherever you go at Intel, is a completely different beast than what many like smaller startup companies try to do as being a platform. But we have a different view on what platforms are and what platforms should solve. And as I said again, like for us, a platform is not only technical. Of course, it's on a relatively small scale compared to all of you making a client that is extensible, because we just cannot do everything. So if we give developers or companies the opportunity to integrate with our clients, it's a small scale platform, but it is a platform for them, which they can use, and they do, because we have great feedback on that. And I mean, we had like the Blue Kiwi on the previous panel who partner with us, who did their own plugin for our client, so their users can use our client to integrate their own service. So I think it's a matter of like really like looking at the different scales of what a platform can be. And I think it's not fair to say like you fail if you are not like large scale and you're like Windows scale or Google scale.
Patrick?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to rebound on that because I really agree with Marco, and I think what we're seeing in the past 2-3 years is that the web has become much more distributed thanks to API, and the meaning of platform and applications, the limit between the two have blurred completely. And to me, Seesmic is a great example of an application that's also a platform because of its plugin architecture. So it resides on top of existing platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Buzz, but at the same time it has this plugin architecture where Exo or Blue Kiwi can come plug into.
Yeah, so that's great. But then Evan Williams, since we're talking about Twitter, basically admitted a few weeks ago that he screwed up. They screwed up with their relation with the developers. So basically, you're playing a dangerous game if you're bailing up on a platform, because how sure can you be that a platform will actually be there 3 years later? How can you show that the relationship you have with you guys will be the same over time? So maybe first you.
Yeah, so just to rebound on what Marco was saying, I think the long-term success of the platform depends on the ability of that platform to help developers to make money. It's all about the money, and we'll see that with
Thank
Seesmic.
you. I like that. All about the money.
Seriously, I mean, a lot of people made a lot of money building applications on Windows in the 80s. And when I say Windows, it's Windows PC, the server, Windows Azure now, Windows Phone, the Xbox. It's all Windows. So if you want to please your developers, you have to make sure that they make money, keep making money, and keep making more money. So there is no money-losing platform. It just doesn't exist. Developers don't want to build for that. So that's why you have to always be sure of.
I see that Peter or something. Yeah.
So I want to answer your question, but I also want to speak to this. It's all about the money. I emphatically believe that we obviously need an organic, self-sustaining.
Guys, keep your mics very close to your mouth.
Organic, self-sustaining, developer-based ecosystem. But when I was at South by, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up and looked out the window, and I saw this line spontaneously forming in front of a dumpster. And the people in that line were like hungover and still drunk and had not gone to bed, but they were in line in the blaring sun.
I do remember that.
And I thought, why are they spontaneously in hundreds of people line? And what they were there for was concert tickets. And it was then that I realized that actually the role of a developer and the role of a musician in the economy are now indistinguishable. So if you think about that, you realize that we all know musicians who do open mic night every Tuesday. They don't make a dime, but they love it. And they do it and they're good, right? And why are they there? They're there because it's a creative outlet, because they're artists, because they have fans, even if the fans aren't going to sustain their economy. There's a reason they're there, and it's not because they get paid. We all know developers like that, right? You write code on .NET during the day for an insurance back end, and at night you're writing, you're on your 20th iPhone app, right? None of which made money, and you keep doing it. So I think when we think about the reward system that we want to give creative people, be they artists, musicians, developers, writers, bloggers, that we need to think about how can we make sure that there is an opportunity for them to become either rich or just well off and buy braces for their kids and get a nice car and go on vacation, but also what are the other things they're in it for, and how can we make sure that they've got really good access to those things too?
Yeah, but that you think about the developer side. So they love building for you. But what's in it for you?
Yeah, no, I
because
think
if they make money, you might make money as well. You can revenue share, there's a lot of stuff. But if they're just doing that for the love, what's in it for you? What's in it for Intel,
I totally,
Microsoft, Google, or even you, Seesmic?
I think it's super important that when you think about investing your time, money, energy, and love into a platform, you are super clear with the platform provider about what their business model is, how transparent they are, and where they want to go. The old school model was that you use platforms as choke points and control points in order to dominate and create virtual or literal monopolies. Generally speaking, as shown by businesses like Seesmic and access to things like Twitter APIs, Facebook APIs, Google APIs, that's not really true anymore. But it's super important that if you are investing in a platform, that you're investing in someone who's transparent about why they're doing it, and that transparency shows an alignment with why you're doing it. If they're in it for a completely different business model, then you got to scratch your head and wonder, is this somebody I want to invest in?
Do you agree, Julien?
I do. I think, when you have a platform ambition, at some point you have to play it nicely with developers. And it can be very temptative for people with a huge platform when they see people being extraordinarily successful on their own platform to try and take that part of the money. Look at what happened between Zynga and Facebook. Zynga...
Symbiotic, yeah.
Zynga represents 50% of Facebook revenues. Zynga is a $600 million company in terms of revenues. Facebook is twice as large. But you're the platform guy, and you see this application making a lot of money. At some point, you're like, should I get into that game myself and make that money myself, or should I let somebody else do that? So that's why we talk about platform, but when you have a great application on one platform, you have to make sure that you can run your application on some other platforms, like the Angry Birds guys are doing. They started on the iPhone, then the iPad, then Android, then they're going to come on the Xbox. So make sure you're not always 100% depending on the very same platform. It can be very, very dangerous because when you're the platform guy, you always have the temptation to do it yourself.
You raised two interesting points there, because we always tend to think about very successful platforms. Nowadays, everybody talks about, obviously, Facebook, Twitter, but many platforms actually do fail. So we have the success stories nowadays, which is why it's very trendy to talk about platforms. But what if I develop stuff for platforms that fails? How can you actually, so you say, basically you say don't put all the eggs in the same basket. And then the second thing you actually raised, which is quite interesting, is platforms is a matrix, because we talk platforms is also about, you said Xbox, it could be, so it could be software or hardware, it could be mobile or PC, it could be a lot of stuff building for a platform, which is also why it's kind of both interesting and kind of hard to mix you all together. So I wanna ask you, the Google guy, the question. So,
go for it.
Yeah. So basically, people know that you're going to be sustainable. So if they develop for you, they will actually be they're there for the long run. But honestly, when people talk about platforms, we know you have great APIs, the great mashups are being done. But this is not always the first example people think about when they talk about successful platforms. Nowadays, they only talk about Twitter and Facebook, basically. So what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, so here you're talking about the fact that social platforms have been super successful because they're viral in nature.
Yeah, it's one type of platform, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, so it's one type of platform, it's very horizontal, but mapping is very horizontal as well, and in this area we're pretty successful. So I would say it kind of depends which platform you're talking about. But to rebound on one of the aspects that was talked about earlier about monetization, it's all about the money. I don't agree, it's not only all about the money. Money is very important and monetization should be a concern. And also the platform provider needs to be very clear about what its objectives are when creating the platform so that developers can trust that they're in there for the long run. But at the same time, there's another aspect. There's the pleasure of programming, and also building infrastructure collaboratively, all the open source movement. Google is very involved into open source.
Yeah,
and we
that
have
was my
lots of
next
efforts
question,
in
actually.
there. We're pushing for open standards, so we're building Chrome as an open source with Chromium. We're pushing HTML5. We have projects like the Go programming language for programming on multi-core, which are not monetized at all. But the goal with that, at the end, is to make the web better as a platform, and we know that at Google we're very good at monetizing that. So that's our ulterior motive for
So
that.
you have also a motive. Open, that was my next question. Open versus closed. This is something obviously many people talk about when they talk about platforms. So obviously you have like different opinions here on stage, so I'm going to actually ask every single one of you what do you think. I'm not going to start with you because this is your shot. Maybe start with you, Julien, about these standards. Should they be open or not? What do you think? I mean, both can coexist, obviously, but what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, it's super important to be super important to be open, and when you have a platform ambition, you have to have a platform that lets any kind of developers, the Microsoft guys, the Java guys, the PHP guys, develop on it. That's super important. For example, right now at Microsoft, the next big thing is Windows Azure, the cloud computing platform for Microsoft. And we're super happy to say that Windows Azure is the most interoperable platform on the market. You can develop on it if you're on .NET, Java, PHP, Ruby, and that will be key because in the world of 2010, you have to let every kind of developers code on your platform, no matter where they come from. And so that was not the case a few years ago, where you wanted developers to uniquely develop for your platform with your own programming language. It has changed a lot, and that world is now over. But I think Microsoft is going in the right direction with that Windows Azure product and the whole interop initiative that we have. It's super key to be open.
Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm sort of firmly undecided on one being superior to the other. Clearly, they both have highly valuable business models. I think this gets back to this notion of transparency and predictability. Openness means that you can, should be able to rely on an infrastructure remaining usable by you, even in the event that you become a direct competitor to the provider of that infrastructure, right? So that's very good, right? That gives you this sort of backdrop of safety that if it is truly open and you can get to the source, then even if the person you're relying on becomes evil, you can scoop the source up, host it somewhere else, and host your own service. That's good. But you can come up with business arrangements that do the same thing with closed software, right? You can get licensing agreements. You can get synergy around what their business model is versus your business model. If it's clearly never in someone's business model to turn you off, then you have a level of predictability and transparency around that. So I mean, I think that we invest very significantly in both closed and open ecosystems. We're huge fans of open source software. We've got an entire operating system called Migo based on that. We also work in other Linux distros, and we love that. That's super important. But at the same time, we love Windows, right? It's been very good for us, and it's been very good for the ecosystem.
Marco?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Peter in general. I think there's place for both, and both have their own merits and advantages and disadvantages. For us, Seesmic being like, we're both a platform consumer and a provider. So our client is, I mean, you can maybe even say it's like more than a middleware than like a really base framework or base platform. Definitely what us helps is if platforms are open, if they're built on open standards. I think that's a distinction you have to make. It's like, is it built on open standards or is the platform itself open? If it's built on open standards, you have reusability of code maybe between different platform providers. So you can adapt your own use cases to different service providers. If the platform then itself is open or not is a different question. And if you have to have like a license agreement with the provider, it's a totally different question. And I think it's fair if providers go either way. I mean, Twitter chose like a very open model. I think the Twitter platform was very successful, was only so successful because the API was so open and everybody could use it. And just a quick remark on the monetization part. I would say like 90% of people who used the Twitter API for building something did that not for money. They did that
That's
just
true.
because it's for fun. As you said, coding pleasure. It was a new platform. Twitter was a cool service, so they played with it. They built something with it.
Is that sustainable in the long term?
I don't know. I mean, it definitely helped building Twitter as a service with users because of all these applications exist, of all these mashups exist around Twitter that massively help Twitter like grow to what they are today. And I believe if Twitter wouldn't have had that API and that openness on their platform, they wouldn't be where they are today.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's merit to both. I mean, open, closed, it depends always on which part you look at.
Yeah, Julien, you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I understand that point on doing free apps on platforms and doing it for fun, but as a platform company, it's our responsibility and to repeat to developers that if they can develop unique stuff that nobody else can develop, they should not do it for free. They should make a living out of it. You don't want to be a hairdresser during the day and a Twitter developer at night. You want to be a Twitter developer full time or a Windows Phone 7 developer full time. So, I mean, there's no problem making money on building great apps on great platform, and I strongly encourage people to do that.
Do you agree with that statement?
Chrome Store, Android Store. We have tons of monetization solution at Google. Yeah.
Okay. Just, I'm gonna take a few questions out of Twitter, out of the stage as well. On Twitter, just tag your question with platform, so hashtag platform. Just last question, and then I'm gonna check the Twitter stream to Peter. Intel. So because many companies are already toying with the idea going platform. So why Intel? Why did you go platform? I mean, you're hardware.
Yeah, what the hell are we doing on stage?
Yeah, what the hell are you doing here? Yeah.
Why is hardware no platform?
That's right.
No, it is, but I'm asking why.
As it turns out, the CPU instruction set is no longer an exclusively viable platform, right? I don't know if anybody noticed that, but while we were all sleeping, people don't write to that abstraction layer anymore, for the most part, right? Barring people at Microsoft, people at Intel, but small long-tail developers are not getting up in the morning thinking about how they're going to do memory management and assembly on x86 or ARM for that matter, right? When we look at the ecosystem, we see there being some phenomenally successful and great ingredients. Like if you look at our partnership with Nokia around MeeGo, if you really want to cook your noodle, right? Well, what CPU architectures does MeeGo currently support? Right? It supports ARM and IA, right? And Intel. So that's an operating system we contribute to every day and supports, our obviously 100% market share in the smart device segment, seeing as we currently have essentially 0% market share. So we're in this because we believe that a great software platform requires reach, it requires breadth, but it also requires a bunch, some very important value add, like how do you help developers market? How do you help developers with open and or proprietary tools? How do you help developers monetize? How do you help developers become leaders and get recognition for their great work, right? Those are all things that we're focused on in addition to things like AppUp, which is our App Store framework, and MeeGo, which is our open source operating system, and Windows, for that matter, and Google.
Kathy, was that a question you just asked? Yeah. So what is the difference between openness and a system build on openness? And I think that was directed to Marco.
Can you repeat the question?
What is the difference between openness and a system built on openness?
I mean, so being open means you support open standards yourself, and you are probably open on a licensing model. Building on open standards mean you are using open standard technologies like HTML, like CSS, like REST API. So people can use it. You can still make that a closed system where you require the users of your platform to have a license agreement with you. So you are using open standards, but you are probably not an open system yourself.
Yeah, there are quite successful open source based platforms in deployment today that haven't seen the light of day outside of their companies for 5 or 6 years and never will, right? So they're sitting behind a data center firewall. They've been tweaked for half a decade, and they're built on open, right? But they're never coming back out.
Another question from Twitter. If you have a question in the audience, just raise your hand. There are free mics actually running around. A question for Brad.
I'll actually run around with a microphone too.
Okay, so
Raise
Thomas
your hand
can
if you have
actually
a
go
question.
around. So just raise your hand. I'm going to take one question from Twitter, and then I'm opening the stage. So Brad asks, advertisers want scale. So aren't we all waiting for platforms to go away soon? Does anyone have something to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, of course they want scale, but I mean, everybody wants scale, right? We all want a TAM of 6.6 billion, people or whatever the population is, but we're not. Nobody's going to get there tomorrow. I think there's this notion of breadth versus depth. You can go shallow and wide, or you can go deep and narrow. Clearly, Apple is for all of the discussion around how powerful they are, they're still quite narrow, right? As opposed to like a Google business model that is extraordinarily wide. Advertisers are clearly willing to embrace both.
Question
Thomas?
Hello, Matteo Cassese from Filmizer. And this comes from a personal experience. I'm more of a user of platforms more than a platform developer. And it's kind of directed towards Google in a sense. But stemming from what happened to me, I spent a lot of time on the code and then got stuck with the legals. So how about helping developers in the terms and conditions and making them, making you more accessible in terms of let us understand better, especially for smaller startups who don't have obviously a very big legal team to understand what the purpose of opening the API is and how to get counsel.
Yeah, maybe Patrick, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat the question? What API are you talking about? Is it about terms and conditions?
Well, it's in the specific, it was the Google Search API, but I guess this can apply to any kind of API where the terms and conditions are obviously aimed at protecting the company that opens the platform, but it's not especially clear in the limits that the platform can be used for. And maybe sometimes having the possibility to have a conversation or having the possibility to, well, the fact is that there aren't so many experts in how to use an API because it's something so new that there's a space for more communication and more.
So I'm going to let Patrick answer, and then I will also take it from Julien.
Yeah, so basically, if you have any questions about terms and conditions for some of our APIs, usually we have developer forums for all these APIs, and you can ask your question in there, and there's someone from one of my teams who will answer in there.
Julien, you want to add something about that?
But that question highlights the fact that when you are a platform company, you have to provide the highest level of technical support to the people building on it. And only a very handful of companies can do that. I mean, at Microsoft, we have hundreds and hundreds of people doing developer evangelism, helping developers to build great applications. And it has to be as friction-free and as self-service as possible. And that's a big challenge for small companies, and even at Microsoft.
I think I see that we run out of time, but is there a last question in the audience or not?
One last question.
Not even from Nokia? No, I'm putting in a bad spot, right? Okay. No questions? Thank you, guys. Oh, you have a question? Go ahead, Peter.
I have a question.
I
have a question. I have a question.
Thomas,
the last
let
thing
him talk.
holding everybody from lunch.
Yeah,
So
here's the question. There was recently an analyst said that there would be 25 million apps in the next 5 years, by the end of the next 5 years. What are we doing as a community to prevent that from being an app apocalypse? Right, 25 million apps is not a good thing if we don't build the infrastructure now to manage it. So what are we doing to solve that problem?
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
For a great panel.